film, when we started it, didn't start out to be a feature film. It actually started out as an idea to do a short film with maybe a music video type format. It definitely would have a musical format. But John and I had originally talked about doing something that was maybe 20 to 30 minutes long. And it just over a period of like 4 years grew and grew and grew into the feature length film that you see today. We John continued throughout the process to have creative ideas about, for example, shooting in Manila at the San Andres School, for doing an amazing concert performance in Mexico City. And as we continued to film over the course of the 4 years, we realized that we actually were going to end up with a feature-length film. We had so much good footage. So that was very exciting, completely changed our goals, where the film could go, just the whole process of making this film. And it was really an amazing experience and quite an adventure.
So Doug's transformation was happening in real time. So we didn't know what he was going to transform into. And that was a big part of the process, was saying, okay, to our team, we're making this movie, it's about Doug, but we really need a lot of latitude creatively to figure out what Doug is going to have as the ultimate outcome of this metamorphosis. We know he's shaving his head and he's tanning and he's getting his ears pierced, but that's kind of jump-started the transformation. We didn't really know where he was going to end up. What was his voice? What was his style? What was his taste and performance? We really had to build it from scratch, and it was coming together as we were making the film. Typically, it would start with some mood boards, where I would pull together images that we could deliver to our style team, and we worked with a few different people on different shoots in terms of styling and costuming, and for the most of the film it was styling. We didn't do a lot of costume design, but then when we got to the concert, we actually were working with costume designers to do bespoke stuff for the stage performance. But I think that Doug has iconic looks throughout the film, and we owe a lot of credit to Ariel Rodriguez, who really pulled together some of these looks where we would see them off of Doug and say, this is the bee, the honey lawson yogurt costume. This is, it's such an iconic thing. This is the psychedelic alley costume with his white coat and these white shoes. This is the drag look. I mean, each of the looks are really iconic, and give into the kind of mythology of Doug, the canon of Doug, and these different moments throughout the film that represent different performances. And then when we got to the stage concert, we were working with a designer here in New York named Okido Burks, and then we had a team in New Mexico City that were actually doing a lot of the construction in real time. So we had a really great team to work with.
Well, at least from my perspective, the music is a very important element of the story. The fact that we made very creative choices when it came to music that we used during the film from third parties, but also John and I were part of the composing team for all the original music. So whether John wrote it, one of the songs John wrote completely, the other songs we co-wrote with other artists. And that process, that creative process, in and of itself was an amazing journey, and just contributed to, I feel, the creative outcome that we had in making this film. It's a very important element to this film.
We started out talking about Doug singing covers. You know, we in the very, very beginning, it seemed so inconceivable that we would develop, write, and record original music for Doug. That just seemed like such a huge undertaking. You know, back earlier in the film where it was a short film, you know. But that process of creating music is really the process through which we kept saying, okay, who is Doug? What is this? Where is this metamorphosis going to land? What is your voice? What is his sound? You know, the music was really what was pushing that along, whether it was in his vocal lessons before we even got into the studio and writing music, where we're just saying, what is your vocal style? Is it going to be very... I don't know, Doug, what were some of the different personality, like vocal personalities that you explored along the way?
Well, I mean, sometimes it was trying to figure out, because I'm a baritone, how do you manipulate that when most pop stars are clearly tenors, you know? So and trying to fit in with that, having the voice that I do, I mean, that poses challenges. So how do I make my unique voice, which is definitely, you know, kind of a radio voice, how do I translate that into music? And it took us a while. We worked with two amazing vocal coaches, Jillian Vicenza and Marlon Saunders, and eventually we nailed the style that we ended up using for the original songs in the film. Partly sung, partly kind of speak singing, but definitely unique and definitely tailored to my voice.
I don't know if it was the most difficult decision that we had to make, but for a while we were going to return to the Philippines to film the concert. So we went and we filmed San Andres, and then the plan was always to go back and film the concert there as well. And along the way, a very big departure from that plan took place, and we ended up going to Mexico City instead, which I think I'm fabulous. It was fabulous that we did that, both because we got to include a little bit more variety in the locations, and we found our perfect venue there. Mm-hmm. But it was also really just a pleasure to be there. Mexico City is such a wonderful place to stay and work and create. It's a very creative environment, and obviously culturally extremely rich. So we had to make a decision about whether Doug's overseas journey was only in the Philippines or whether he was doing more of a world tour.
One of our other very challenging artistic decisions was what Doug was going to look like in drag. So we went through a host of different looks, trying different wigs, trying different makeup artists, trying to perfect what the look would be that would really be iconic for the film. And it really wasn't until we got to the Philippines and saw the work of one of the drag queens, whose first name is Ian, that we hit on the look that was really iconic for Doug, which was to use the cranial that I already have and to just develop just amazing makeup and amazing costume that really fit Doug. And we really didn't know until we actually got to the Philippines what Doug's look was going to be, and it ended up being. I mean, it was a lot of work to get into that get up, but it was just amazing. Actually, when I see it, it's one of my favorite parts of the film.
As I mentioned earlier, there grew an intimacy between Doug and I, and the way that we worked together, and the conversations I was having with him about his life. And I was starting to also get to know Gina, Doug's wife. And so now I'm very close with them, but it was a process to get to know them and to understand their dynamic, and their marriage, and how their marriage has been so successful and lasted so many years, and talking about really delicate subjects like why didn't you have children, and what became a very clear theme both in the conversations that Doug and I were having privately, as well as something that is touched on in the movie, is mental health and mental wellness. And I saw that Gina was very supportive of Doug in going on this crazy journey and doing what he needed to do to kind of discover and learn more about himself. But Gina was going through that in her own way as well, in terms of her age, and is she going to retire as a gardener? Is she going to continue working? And there had to be a decision made about how we were going to address the domestic relationship between Doug and Gina. And that's where became a decision that those elements between Doug and Gina might be a little scripted, or we might go into a more surreal interpretation of what's going on with Doug as we're going on this journey. How are we going to express what's going on in his inner world? So we could have followed Doug and Gina with only a documentary style, but going into the surreal elements was just a different way to explore Doug's inner world. Well, I'll start by saying that we started working with our editor, Rachel, before we wrapped filming. So around the time that we got back from the Philippines, we had her, as well as her co-worker, starting to cut together some of the material so we could see where things were taking shape. At that point, we were still thinking we're making a movie that's under an hour. So the edit portion of the process began very early, and it went on for a very long time. There was a lot of, especially when it came to the sequence we were just speaking about, we cut that in a lot of different ways to try and figure out how to make it really click. So we worked with Rachel for quite a long time on the edit. And then when we locked the picture, moving into sound design, color, and visual effects was something that Doug and I were doing for the first time. But we were working with incredibly talented people.
Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for all your support.